All right, today we're jumping into a huge deal that's making some serious waves. We're talking about one of the biggest names in tech, small town in Mississippi, and this massive promise of an economic boom. But is it really a boom or is it a bust? Let's get into it. Okay, it all kicks off with this number, $20 billion. That's the mind-boggling size of the investment Elon Musk's company XAI has just announced for a new data center down in South Haven, Mississippi. I mean, that is a truly staggering figure, so let's try to wrap our heads around what that actually means. And for the state of Mississippi, this is way more than just a big number. We're hearing officials like Governor Tate Reeves call it a totally historic, record-shattering deal. Literally the single largest private investment the state has ever seen. But that brings us to the real heart of the matter here. When a deal this huge lands in a town, what does it actually mean for the folks who live there? Is this the economic miracle they're hoping for, the thing that's going to lift everyone up? Or is there another side to this story we're not seeing? All right, so first up, let's just look at how this whole thing came together. The official announcement, as you might guess, painted a pretty rosy picture of a landmark achievement for the state. Even Elon Musk himself chimed in, praising the, and I quote, insane execution speed of the deal. The project, which has this kind of cool code name Macro Hard Drive, is all part of XAI's grand plan to build what they're calling the world's largest supercomputer. And yeah, they're moving at warp speed. So with that incredible speed in mind, let's talk about the official promise. What exactly is being sold to the public here? Well, the whole pitch is really built on this foundation of jobs, revenue, and a shiny high-tech future. Governor Reeves, for his part, laid out this incredibly optimistic vision. He's talking about hundreds of permanent, high-paying jobs. Then, thousands more indirect jobs for contractors and suppliers. And, of course, a huge wave of new tax money to help pay for things like schools, police, and fire departments. The promise is nothing short of transformational, that this one investment will change the entire region for generations to come. And really, this image perfectly captures the idea they're selling, this vision of a new industrial revolution for Mississippi, all powered by AI. It's a promise of prosperity, of high-tech opportunity for the whole community. Okay, but that's the official story. Now we're going to pivot. Let's look at what some of the residents, the experts, and industry insiders are saying. And well, it's a very different picture. Because the big question a lot of people are asking is this. When one of these massive data centers comes to town, who really benefits? Now this is where it gets really interesting. Look at the contrast here. While the governor is out there talking about hundreds of jobs, the estimates from folks in the community, people who know this industry, they're talking drastically lower numbers, maybe 30 to 50 permanent jobs. Some are even saying it could be less than that. That's a huge gap. So why the massive difference? Well, it all comes down to what a data center actually is. Think of it as a giant, specialized warehouse just full of computers. And this gets to a really fundamental point. Data centers are what we call capital intensive. They cost an absolute fortune to build, but they are not labor intensive. Once they're up and running, you just don't need that many people. You need some security and a few technicians to swap out broken parts. That's about it. And that brings us to the hidden price tag. Because beyond the questions about jobs, there are some very real and very high costs that the community and the state might end up paying. Let's start with power. The facility they're planning is going to need 2 gigawatts of electricity. Now, to put that into perspective, that is enough energy to power a small state. It's the equivalent of running something like 8 nuclear reactors. It is an almost unimaginable amount of power for just one building. And that massive hunger for energy, it has a direct consequence for everyday people. When the local power grid gets strained like that, it almost always needs super expensive upgrades. And guess who usually foots the bill for that? Yup, the cost often gets passed right on down to residents and small businesses through higher monthly utility bills. Then you've got the taxes, or maybe I should say the lack of taxes. As part of this deal, Mississippi is giving XAI these sweeping tax breaks for a full 10 years. That means no sales tax on all their crazy expensive equipment, no corporate income tax, no franchise tax, and on top of all that, way lower property taxes. We are talking about billions, potentially, in tax revenue that the state is just giving up. So let's do some quick back-of-the-napkin math here. When you take that $20 billion investment and divide it by the hundreds of jobs that were promised, the cost to the public per job ends up being somewhere between $50 and $200 million. That is a staggering price tag, and it really makes you question the return on this investment for the taxpayers. And of course, we can't ignore the environmental side of this. Generating 2 gigawatts of power creates a ton of pollution, and cooling all those servers, that takes millions and millions of gallons of water. Groups like the NAACP and the Southern Environmental Law Center have already raised the alarm. They're pointing to serious environmental justice concerns and the long, sad history of placing these kinds of polluting facilities in or near predominantly Black communities. Okay, for our last section, let's zoom out. Because this story in Mississippi, it isn't happening in a vacuum. It's actually part of a much, much bigger global race that's completely changing what we even think of as industry. This is such a powerful comparison. On the left, you've got that classic image of 20th century industry, a busy factory floor, just packed with hundreds of workers. And on the right, you have a modern data center, huge, silent, automated, and almost totally empty. This visual contrast really gets to the heart of the massive economic shift we're all living through right now. One community member put it in a way that really stuck with me. They called it the new digital delta. And their quote is powerful. They said it simply repackages the historic exploitation of the Mid-South where companies extract value and tax breaks while dumping pollution. Wow. It frames this project not as something new and innovative, but as a high-tech version of a very old story for the region. Ultimately, what this all boils down to is pretty simple. The global race for AI supremacy is, at its core, an energy race. This insatiable hunger for more computing power is driving an equally insatiable hunger for electricity. And that's what's leading to these massive, high-stakes deals in communities all across the country. And that leaves us with this final thought to chew on. As this AI arms race just keeps accelerating, the real challenge for towns like South Haven, and really for all of us, is going to be figuring out how to balance the dazzling promise of all this technological progress with its very real and often very hidden price.